Ducks. The Ducks. Where have you been all my life? Hey guys, welcome to Amity Tracks. I wanted to talk about the Ducks. We haven't done a deep dive into a particular album in a while. It's actually something that, early on when we started this channel, something I kind of intended on doing fairly regularly, but we've just got off on all these other types of shows and series and all that. And I don't know. I just haven't had the urge to talk about one particular album for a whole episode until now. I want to talk about the Ducks, High Flyin'. Now, these are the Ducks, by the way. You recognize at least one of those guys? Maybe this guy here. That's right, that is Neil Young. He was a member of the Ducks. Now, I'm ashamed to say I'm just kind of discovering this. Neil Young's my favorite artist. And, we did actually a lot of you guys watched it. It was a pretty successful week for our standards, at least on this channel. Did a whole Neil Young week, right, where we did this deep dive and I ranked all of his albums, and which was expanded over multiple episodes, but ranked all the albums, talked about the live stuff, even did a whole separate episode on the archives releases, of which this is a part of. This came out earlier this year. I think the only archives I didn't buy when it came out, just because, I was like, oh, okay, well, this is sort of this group project that Neil was a part of, and he wasn't even the focal point, and I just didn't bother, didn't bother buying it. I remember there was even, when I did the archives episode in that Neil Young week, I think there was somebody, one of you guys in the comments was like, you really need to check out the Ducks. Because I think I talked about like every other freaking, release in the archives but this. And I was like, yeah. Well, okay, finally I did check out the Ducks. Blew me away. So since even in the whole Neil Young week, I didn't talk about this record at all, let's talk about it now. Let's do a deep dive into the Ducks, High Flyin', because it's an interesting story. It's a fantastic record. 5-star record in my view. Well, there's 3 records in here. It's on 2 CDs or 3 albums, but it's a live set. They didn't. There's one studio song on this thing, but everything else is live. So I don't think they spent much time in the studio. So got my notes here so I can give you the facts, the background on the Ducks. Summer of 1977 is when they form. Early fall, late summer of 1977 is when they disband. So they're only together for a few months. It's not surprising knowing Neil Young is involved, right? How mercurial he is. Moves on from project to project. So the story is, so Neil Young was hanging out in the spring of 77 with Jerry Miller, who, former singer and guitarist for Moby Grape. They had all known each other from back in the late 60s, in California. And there were a bunch of other guys kind of hanging out too and playing, including former Moby Grape bassist Bob Mosley and Jeff Blackburn, who was a singer-songwriter of, he didn't have a ton of success, but some success, from that era in the late 60s, early 70s. And Neil knew Jeff Blackburn from way back when. Interesting fact, the classic Neil Young song, My, My, Hey, Hey, or Hey, Hey, My, both versions. But My, Hey, Hey, if you look at the songwriting credits on that, it's rare for Neil Young to have co-songwriting credits on songs. But Jeff Blackburn is the co-writer on My, Hey, Hey. And if I understand it right, one of the classic lines attributed to Neil Young, right? It's better to burn out than to fade away. My understanding is actually a Jeff Blackburn line. So there you go. But anyway, so Neil, Mosley, Blackburn, and and session drummer Johnny Caviato start kind of hanging out and jamming, and it's gelling, and they're loving it. Interesting about Johnny Caviato, later he starts his own drum company, the Caviato Drum Company. But anyway, they're jamming, and then it's kind of decide to form a band, and because they're enjoying it, called the Ducks. I think originally it was the Jeff Blackburn band. So this is kind of interesting. This group was really a group of equals. Neil Young was by far the best known member of this band, but he was really 1/4 of the band. It wasn't Neil Young and some friends. It's the Ducks. Okay, and we'll talk about that democratic approach when we talk about the record. So they got together and they started jamming. They put some songs together. A lot of the repertoire was just some of Neil's songs. Each one of them was a songwriter, so they all kind of brought just their own songs to the table. And they started playing around some bars and clubs around Santa Monica, California, at the time. That's kind of where they were hanging out. Neil had moved there recently. And an interesting thing I was reading. So they were talking about taking this on the road, like touring. But supposedly Neil had some sort of contract with Crazy Horse. It basically said if Neil was going to tour, with a band, it had to be Crazy Horse. And so in order to not violate that deal or whatever he had with Crazy Horse, they could only play within the Santa Monica, city limits or whatever. So I don't know. Anyway, but that summer they just played a bunch of shows in the Santa Monica area, and just calling themselves the Ducks, and charging $3 covers, and just small club stuff. It would have been fascinating just to be walking into some club and it's these guys, right? But obviously word spreads about who's involved in this thing, and you start getting bigger and bigger crowds. One of the things is people started bringing those duck calls, the duck, I guess when you're ducking out, wah, wah, wah. Yeah. So supposedly, as crowds grew at these shows, you heard a lot of wah, wah, in the audience because everyone brought these little duck calls. Makes sense. All right. So, like I said, word does start getting around, and it gets kind of out of hand by this time because sort of the Neil Young fans especially start to descend upon these shows, and it gets kind of unruly, and it becomes a lot of people in the audience were just shouting out for Neil Young songs and kind of getting impatient with the other guys' songs. And as typical with Neil Young, when the vibes change, he's out of there. So he kind of you know called it quits and closed down the whole thing. And these shows just became part of legend, for a long time, until earlier this year in the Neil Young's The Gift That Keeps on Giving, the archives, Neil Young's archives, he put out this live document of the Ducks shows. Now, just to note, Jeff Blackburn actually did die earlier, I think in January of this year. So rest in peace, Jeff Blackburn. All right, let's talk about the record. So this, like I said, triple record, double on CD. It was really the only official documents we have of the Ducks' existence, and it really is a democratic affair. I mean, Neil Young gets about or takes lead, either songwriting and vocals on 1/4 of the songs. Jeff Blackburn gets about that much. Bob Mosley gets about that much. Johnny Caviato, I don't think he wrote as much because the songs that he sings lead on, I think, are mostly kind of covers and stuff. But anyway, I mean, it really is kind of this democratic process. And God, why do I love this record so much? I mean, it's a perfect combination of these are really good musicians. So it's sort of tight in that sense, but also really loose and they're having fun. It's tight and loose at the same time. So it does kind of have this Crazy Horse vibe, as far as just kind of the sound. But think of Crazy Horse, but with sort of a stepped up musicianship. I think Jeff Blackburn, Bob Mosley. So it's Neil Young on guitar and some harmonica and vocals, Jeff Blackburn on guitar and vocals, Bob Mosley on bass and vocals, and Johnny Caviato on drums and vocals. And so think of kind of Crazy Horse at their best, but with sort of stepped up musicianship. And if every member of Crazy Horse could write and sing songs. So that's kind of what this is. And this is 1977. So this is Neil is kind of at a peak here in his own creativity and playing and artistry and everything else. So yeah, this band sounds. I mean, they're like I said, tight but loose, tight but comfortable. This band sounds like they've been together for a long time when you listen to them play. There's two things that really stand out or surprise me about this. One, I've got to say, I think this is the best playing I have heard on electric guitar from Neil Young. I think this is the best electric guitar I've ever heard from Neil Young. Just consistently throughout a whole album, or a whole show or live document or whatever. He is blazing throughout this thing. He takes most of the leads. Although Jeff Blackburn is actually a very good guitar player too. You can kind of anyone who listens to Neil long enough, you kind of know his style and his tone, so you can kind of tell the difference between when it's Blackburn or Neil playing, and both of them just great guitar interplay. Man, I wish these guys had played together more. And I think since the pressure was off, Neil's only has to sing and kind of sort of take the lead on a fourth of the songs. So I think he's really enjoying kind of laying back and just like being the guitar player, on a lot of this stuff, which is cool. And he just dives into it with gusto. Jeff Blackburn is a revelation to me. Such a great songwriter. I've got to say, my favorite songs on this are Blackburn songs, not even Neil Young songs. Well, Neil's songs are great as always, but and actually Bob Mosley has a great set of songs too. But Blackburn's songs, Jeff Blackburn, just blow me away. I kind of wrote them down here. Younger Days, Two Riders, Hold On Boys, Wide Eyed and Willing, and Silver Wings. Silver Wings is so good, they put it on here twice. It closes the first set and then closes the second set. Because there's basically two sets on here. That's the only song that's a repeat, by the way. Everything else is unique, but it's worth it because that's an incredible song. I love hearing it twice. Yeah. And like I said, Bob Mosley too. The one studio track, "I Am a Dreamer," is a Mosley song, and it's good. Probably the highlight of Mosley's tunes are "Gypsy Wedding," which is a great song. There's even some fun instrumentals they throw in here, both songwriting wise attributed to Blackburn, but "Hey Now" and "Windward Passage." "Windward Passage" is awesome. Really, like I say, complex. We're not dealing with progressive rock or anything, but got some kind of nice arpeggios and some nice passages in there. Really good. "Hey Now" is just sort of a fun toss off. It's it's kind of a 12-bar blues type of thing where they got this kind of cool riff going. It's almost kind of surfy a little bit, and then when they finish the 12 bars, they kind of pause and you hear Neil, "Hey Now." That's like the whole lyric of the whole song, and they play the whole thing through, and it's "Hey Now." Anyway, it's fun. It's fun. Now the Neil Young songs are great. Probably the best versions of all of these songs that he puts on here. And typical of Neil, it's not like a greatest hits thing. This is 1977, so whatever he's sort of writing and into in 77 is most of what's on here. Although there's a couple of tunes where he does reach back. Great version of "Are You Ready for the Country," but also "Sail Away," "Human Highway," "Little Wing," and the highlight of Neil's tunes is "Mr. Soul," the old Buffalo Springfield nugget. Just blazing version of "Mr. Soul." They rock through that so hard. And Neil said that he thinks the Ducks version was better than any version he ever played with Buffalo Springfield in those legendary Springfield shows. Uh, I've never heard a better version of Mr. Soul than what's on here, so I got to take Neil's word for it. Yeah, this is just one of the very best live albums I have heard in a long, long, long time. I give it 5 stars. Highly recommend it. If you were like me and made the mistake, even if you're a huge Neil fan, of just sort of passing this by because it just sounded like this sort of little side project of these other guys, and Neil wasn't the focal point. Don't worry about that. Um, I love it. I mean, like I said, there's a revelation on the Neil Young front, just incredible guitar playing, great versions of his songs. But for me, the high point here is the Jeff Blackburn material. I love the Jeff Blackburn stuff. So highly recommend it. The Ducks, High Flyin', check it out. Also, check out the rest of our videos here on Amity Tracks. Please do subscribe if you haven't so far. Hit the bell for notifications, like the videos, share the videos. All that stuff really helps us out. And we'll see you next time on Amity Tracks.